I'm Nancy Cavey, National ERISA and Individual Disability Attorney. Welcome to Winning Isn't Easy. Before we get started, I've got to give you that legal disclaimer that the Florida Bar requires. This podcast is not legal advice. So now I've said it, but nothing prevents me from giving you an easy to understand overview of the disability insurance world, the games the carriers play, and what you need to know to get your disability benefits. So off we go. April is National Parkinson's Month. This episode is going to be devoted to Parkinson's disability insurance claims. I'm going to cover a lot of topics today. And the first topic I'm going to cover is the evaluation process used by every disability insurance carrier in deciding whether or not to pay your Parkinson's claim and deciding whether or not they're going to continue to pay your benefits or they're going to deny or terminate your claim. Secondly, I'm going to talk about what you need to know about how a disability carrier views a Parkinson's claim. And third, I'm going to talk about the attending physician statement form, the key to winning your disability benefits. And I'm going to close with my David versus Goliath story, proving that your Parkinson's symptoms cause functional limitations, and the story of Ms. Withers, Adanta's Director of Supported Employment Programs, and how she beat Mutual of Omaha. This story will tie this whole episode together. So before we get started, we're going to take a quick break. So stay tuned.
Have you been robbed of your peace of mind from your disability insurance carrier? You owe it to yourself to get a copy of Robbed of Your Peace of Mind, which provides you with everything you need to know about the long-term disability claim process. Request your free copy of the book at caveylaw.com today.
Welcome back to Winning Isn't Easy. I'm going to first talk about the evaluation process used by every disability insurance carrier in deciding whether to pay your Parkinson's claim and in deciding whether or not they're going to deny your benefits, terminate your benefits, or continue to pay your benefits. Now, I know that you've purchased your disability policy through your employer or on your own to provide your family with peace of mind if you become disabled. What you do need to understand is that a disability carrier will rarely pay benefits for PD, Parkinson's disease, in the early stages of the disease. And that's because it's often difficult to diagnose and even difficult to get doctors to assign restrictions and limitations. So what do you need to know about Parkinson's disease that disability carriers just don't seem to understand? Well, PD is a gradual, but it's a progressive disorder of the central nervous system that impacts your movement. Now, in the early stages, there'll be noticeable tremors in just one hand. You'll have little or no facial expression, and your arms generally don't swing when you walk. And these symptoms, of course, are going to be progressive. Now, also, the symptoms of Parkinson's can include cognitive issues and emotional issues. The presentation varies from person to person. That can make it difficult, not only difficult to diagnose, but difficult to see the progression of the disease process. And those two things really play into a disability carrier's weapons. They're looking for a definitive diagnosis. They're looking for a progression of symptoms that impact your ability to function, and they're looking for restrictions and limitations that will impact your ability to do your own or any occupation. Now, they apply or try to apply a cookie cutter approach to these claims, and they don't look at a person's the totality of symptoms or the progression of the symptoms, and that is an issue. So what is the evaluation process used by a carrier in every Parkinson's claim? First thing they're going to do is look for defenses to the claim, and that's called a coverage defense. They're going to ask first, is your Parkinson's disease a pre-existing condition? Every policy has a pre-existing condition clause, and it says that if you become disabled within a certain period of time after you have become covered, your disability is considered a pre-existing condition. Now, they're going to do a look-back period, and they're going to see whether or not you got treatment for your disabling condition during this period. And if so, the carrier is legally able to deny your claim. Now, this can be a huge problem in two respects. One is if you've just been hired by the employer and you are getting on their insurance coverage, and you're getting treatment for your PD, or your PD hasn't been diagnosed, but you're getting treatment for other issues, the carrier might say that it's a pre-existing condition. But it can also be a problem if your employer is switching carriers. And unless there's an agreement between the insurance companies to address pre-existing condition situations, carriers, the new carrier might be inclined to say, oh, no, you are excluded from coverage because it's a pre-existing condition. And the original carrier will say, well, you were never disabled during the period of time when we covered you. So that can be an issue, and one that you really need to consult a lawyer with if you're learning that your employer is going to be changing disability insurance companies. Number two, they want to know if there is an objective evidence or medical evidence that's the basis of the diagnosis. Now, there are disability policies that require objective medical evidence of diagnosis, and that, quite frankly, should be coming from a Parkinson's disease specialist. It's also crucial that you're giving an accurate history of your symptoms at each visit. So you might have uncontrolled tremors, muscle stiffness, an inability to do voluntary movements, impaired posture or balance, a loss of automatic movements, including blinking or smiling, changes in your speech, changes in your writing, difficulty concentrating, cognitive issues, depression. Now, the important thing here is that the carrier is looking closely at your medical records to make sure that your history of your symptoms is consistent with Parkinson's, your diagnostic findings are consistent with Parkinson's, and the examination findings are consistent with Parkinson's, because they're looking for inconsistencies as a way to deny your claim. Now, the next question that they're going to look at, or issue they're going to look at, is there an objective medical evidence that's the basis for the restrictions and limitations assigned by your physician? Your doctor is going to be asked to fill out these blasted forms called attending physician statement forms, APS forms. Those forms ask about the restrictions and limitations, but if you've ever looked at them, they really don't, in my view, ask the right questions, because they're designed to be generically applied. They're also designed to lead the doctor to say that you can engage in sedentary work or some of the material and substantial duties of your occupation. Now, if you're in the own occupation stage, that's one thing. If you're in the any occupation stage, that can be an issue, because if you can do sedentary work, the carrier is going to deny your claim on the basis that that sedentary work ability lets you do other work. Now, the APS form is going to ask your physician to explain the objective medical evidence that supports your restrictions and limitations. And that can be tough, as we've talked about before, because of the nature and the progression of the symptoms and the fact that people present differently. People have good days, bad days. People have different reactions to medications. So there is no uniform presentation. But your doctor has got to explain the objective medical evidence in your case, that supports these restrictions and limitations. Now, I think that one of the ways to help your doctor do this is to actually give your doctor what's called an interval history of your symptoms and how those symptoms impact your functionality. And I'm going to give you a tip about the APS form later in this podcast. Now, number 4 is there a causal relationship between the Parkinson's diagnosis and those restrictions and limitations and your inability to do your own or any occupation? So the key to getting your disability benefits is that APS form. But what I do is I supplement that APS form with a Social Security Disability Parkinson's Residual Functional Capacity form. Now, why would I do that? Well, because the Social Security RFC form asks the right questions about a Parkinson's case, asks the right questions about your symptoms, and asks the right question about your functionality. Now, the carrier is going to have their medical unit review your file and the APS forms to determine your real restrictions and limitations. Unfortunately, they don't have to accept what your physician has to say. And sometimes they will hire a medical gun, that will say that there's no objective basis for the restrictions and limitations assigned to by your physician. So at step 4, what's going to happen next is they're going to send your file to a vocational rehabilitation counselor, ultimately, to say, what is your occupation at the time you became disabled? What are your physical duties? What are your cognitive duties? Because they're going to try to determine whether or not there is a causal relationship between the diagnosis and the restrictions and limitations and your inability to do your own or any other occupation. And of course, there's always a fight about what your occupation is. If your claim is being denied based on a fight about your own occupation, you really do need to hire an attorney because often the carrier's VE, vocational evaluator, will get this issue wrong. Now, at step 5, they're going to say, okay, now we've looked at your medical records, but what do your activities of daily living forms say? Are they consistent with what's in those records, or is it consistent with what you told the adjuster on that phone call? Carriers are in the business of collecting premiums and not paying benefits. They're going to be looking at that ADL form. They're going to be looking at your medical records. They're going to see, is there any consistency or inconsistency? And there are times when those forms, those records, will lead them to put surveillance on you. If you think you are being surveilled, you need to hire a lawyer right away. The next thing the carrier is going to be looking at is, okay, we got to pay benefits, but does the policy limit how long we have to pay those benefits? Now, some policies will have clauses called subjective medical condition clauses that will legally limit how long they have to pay benefits. And a subjective condition limitation policy provision may say something like, any medical condition that's characterized by pain or stiffness is limited to just 2 years. Or there might be a mental nervous policy limitation in the policy that says we're only going to pay benefits for 2 years if this disability claim is caused or contributed to, regardless of how small, by any psychological issues such as depression. Now look, I know that depression is a feature of Parkinson's disease. And so you need to understand if there are any subjective medical condition limitations or mental nervous limitation in your policy so that you understand how long your disability benefits are going to be paid. Now, we have talked about the basics. Let's talk about how carriers view these claims, how it really works in the real world.